The billionaire CEO had watched her daughter remain silent for 8 years, but on the morning she saw the little girl run across a crowded hotel lobby, grab a stranger's hand, and form words with trembling lips, she nearly dropped her phone. The stranger was a single father wearing a faded work jacket, and nobody in the building knew that beneath that ordinary jacket was a man carrying a military past powerful enough to explain why he had saved her daughter without hesitation. What stunned everyone even more was what the little girl whispered next, because it was the first spoken word she had ever voluntarily given another person. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please take a moment to like this story, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel so our family can continue bringing you emotional stories that remind us that sometimes the people who seem broken are the ones who know exactly how to save us. Her name was Celeste Whitmore, and at 39, she was one of the most powerful technology executives in the country. Newspapers called her brilliant, relentless, and nearly impossible to intimidate. Investors admired her discipline. Competitors feared her instincts. Employees respected her because she had built her company from a tiny software startup into a global corporation without inheriting a single dollar of it. Yet there was one place where all of Celeste's confidence disappeared. It happened whenever she looked at her 8-year-old daughter, Brielle. Brielle had been born profoundly deaf, and after a frightening childhood illness, she had gradually withdrawn from spoken communication altogether. She communicated beautifully through American Sign Language, facial expressions, drawings, and the private little gestures she had invented with her mother, but whenever someone tried to encourage her to speak, she became frightened and shut down. Celeste had spent years bringing her to specialists, therapists, teachers, and speech professionals. Nothing changed the wall that had quietly grown between Brielle and the spoken world. Celeste never considered her daughter incomplete. She hated when people treated Brielle as fragile or helpless. But privately, she carried a guilt she could never explain to anyone. She wondered whether her own obsession with building an empire had somehow made her unavailable when Brielle needed her most. She attended meetings through video calls from therapy centers, answered investor questions while sitting beside hospital beds, and flew across the country for specialists. Yet there were still mornings when Brielle looked toward her mother and seemed to ask, without signing a single word, whether the company would always come before her. Celeste would put down her phone immediately, pull her daughter close, and promise that nothing mattered more. She meant it every time. She simply did not know how to prove it. That morning, Celeste had brought Brielle to the Grand Meridian Hotel for a children's charity event her company was sponsoring. The ballroom was filled with families, volunteers, doctors, and donors. Sunlight poured through enormous windows, turning the polished floor almost silver. Brielle had been holding her mother's hand when a stack of donated art supplies toppled near the entrance. A little boy darted backward, nearly knocking Brielle into a decorative glass display. Before Celeste could react, a man crossed several feet of polished marble with startling speed, caught Brielle around the shoulders, and gently pulled her away from the falling display. The glass shattered behind them. Celeste's heart stopped. Her security team rushed forward, but the stranger had already positioned himself between Brielle and the broken glass. He checked her hands, knees, and face before stepping back. He did not touch her again. He simply crouched until they were eye level and waited. The man was perhaps in his early 40s, broad-shouldered without looking intimidating, with weathered hands and a calm expression that seemed strangely out of place amid the chaos. His name was Callum Reed. He was a single father who worked as a facilities supervisor for the hotel and occasionally repaired commercial equipment on the side to support his 9-year-old son, Finn. Brielle stared at him. Then something extraordinary happened. She raised both hands and signed to him. Celeste froze because Callum understood immediately. He answered in sign language. Not perfectly, not theatrically, but naturally, like someone who had used it for years. Brielle's frightened expression softened. She touched the sleeve of his jacket and signed that she was scared. Callum signed back that she was safe. He asked whether she was hurt. Brielle shook her head. Then, while everyone watched in silence, she pointed toward Callum's chest and made a small gesture Celeste recognized from one of their private conversations. It meant she trusted him. Celeste had never seen Brielle trust a stranger so quickly. But what happened next shattered every assumption she had ever made. Brielle opened her mouth. Her voice came out weak, uneven, and almost breathless. Safe. Celeste stopped breathing. For 8 years, she had waited to hear her daughter's voice. Therapists had explained that speech might come slowly, unexpectedly, or perhaps not at all. Celeste had tried not to make Brielle feel pressured by that possibility. But now, in the middle of a crowded hotel lobby, her daughter had spoken to a man she had known for less than a minute. Celeste covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Callum looked equally stunned. He did not celebrate. He did not tell Brielle how amazing she was. He simply smiled gently and signed that she had done something brave. That response made Brielle smile. Celeste walked toward them with tears running down her face. She wanted to thank him, question him, and somehow understand what had just happened. But before she could, Brielle grabbed Callum's hand and refused to let go. The billionaire CEO who could negotiate billion-dollar acquisitions suddenly found herself unable to speak. Over the following weeks, Celeste discovered that Callum was unlike anyone she had ever met. He was not impressed by her wealth. He did not ask for favors. He did not try to become important in her daughter's life. In fact, he seemed uncomfortable whenever Celeste offered him anything beyond ordinary gratitude. Callum had a son named Finn, a bright 9-year-old who loved model airplanes and constantly carried a notebook filled with sketches. Finn and Brielle became friends almost immediately. Brielle taught him signs, and Finn taught her how to build paper aircraft. Their friendship gave both children something they had been missing, someone who understood that being different did not mean being less. Celeste began noticing something else. Callum watched people carefully. He always knew where the exits were. He instinctively positioned himself between children and moving crowds. He noticed loose electrical cables before anyone else. Once, when a heavy metal cart began rolling down a service ramp, he reached it before 2 trained security guards could react. Celeste became suspicious. One afternoon, while Brielle and Finn were drawing together in a sunny hotel garden, Celeste quietly asked the hotel manager about Callum. The manager hesitated. That hesitation told Celeste everything. Callum had asked for his employment records to remain private. His resume showed almost nothing about the years before he became a civilian. But an old security document contained a phrase that made Celeste's stomach tighten: former United States Navy Special Warfare Operator. Callum had been a Navy SEAL. Celeste confronted him that afternoon. Callum did not deny it. He simply explained that he had left the military years earlier after losing members of his unit during a mission overseas. The details were classified, and he did not speak about them. After returning home, he married his childhood friend, Evelyn. They had Finn. For several years, Callum believed he had finally found peace. Then Evelyn died unexpectedly from a sudden illness. Callum became both mother and father to Finn overnight. He left military life completely, refused high-paying security contracts, and chose ordinary work because he wanted his son to grow up knowing him as a father rather than as a soldier. Celeste finally understood why he never talked about his past. But she also learned something that changed the way she saw him. Callum had not simply walked away from the military. He had spent years believing he had failed the people he could not save. That guilt had followed him into civilian life. Brielle, strangely enough, seemed to sense it. She never asked him about the war. She never asked about medals or missions. She simply noticed when he became quiet and would sit beside him without demanding an explanation. One afternoon, Celeste watched from across the garden as Brielle handed Callum a small drawing. It showed 3 people holding hands beneath a giant yellow sun. There was Brielle, Finn, and Callum. Celeste was standing beside them in the picture. Callum stared at it for a long time. Then he looked toward Celeste with an expression she had never seen before. Fear. Not fear of her. Fear of belonging. Celeste finally understood that Callum had spent years protecting himself from attachment because attachment meant having something else to lose. She also realized she had been doing the same thing. Her company had become her armor. Her wealth had become her shield. Her schedule had become an excuse not to confront the loneliness inside her own home. The real turning point came when Brielle was invited to participate in a children's community presentation. She wanted to stand on stage and speak one sentence. Celeste was terrified. She worried that the pressure would hurt her daughter. But Brielle insisted. Callum helped her practice without ever forcing her to use her voice. He taught her that courage did not mean speaking perfectly. Courage meant trying even when your voice shook. On the day of the presentation, sunlight poured through the windows of the community center. Brielle walked onto the small stage beside Finn. Her hands trembled. Celeste sat in the front row. Callum stood near the back. Brielle looked at her mother. Then she looked at Callum. She took a slow breath. And spoke. My family makes me brave. Her voice was quiet. The room became completely still. Celeste began crying. Callum lowered his head, fighting his own tears. Then Brielle signed the same sentence with her hands, because she wanted everyone to understand that her voice was not replacing her language. It was simply another part of her. The audience rose in applause. But Celeste did not care about the applause. She cared about the look on her daughter's face. For the first time, Brielle did not look afraid of being different. She looked proud. After the presentation, Celeste found Callum outside beneath the bright afternoon sky. She thanked him for everything he had done. But Callum told her that Brielle had saved him too. Celeste realized then that the relationship between them had never been about a billionaire hiring a hero. It had been about two families discovering that broken pieces could fit together without needing to be repaired first. Months passed. Celeste changed. She began leaving meetings earlier. She stopped measuring love in expensive gifts and started measuring it in ordinary moments. Breakfast together. School projects. Walks. Conversations. Quiet afternoons when nobody needed to accomplish anything. Callum changed too. He began forgiving himself. He visited veteran support groups. He started volunteering with children who had lost parents. He allowed Finn to ask questions about his military years instead of avoiding every mention of them. Most importantly, he stopped believing that surviving meant he had to spend the rest of his life alone. Brielle continued speaking occasionally, but she never abandoned sign language. Her voice became stronger at her own pace. Some days she spoke more. Some days she did not. And nobody pressured her. That was the greatest lesson Celeste learned. Love was not about forcing someone to become what the world expected. Love was about making them feel safe enough to become whoever they truly were. A year after the day in the hotel lobby, Celeste stood beside Callum at a small community gathering where Brielle and Finn were helping younger children learn basic signs. There were no cameras, no investors, and no reporters. Just families. Just laughter. Just children. Brielle suddenly took Callum's hand and then reached for Celeste's. She placed their hands together. Celeste looked at her daughter. Then at Callum. Neither of them needed words. They both understood. Callum had once believed his greatest failure was being unable to save everyone. Celeste had once believed her greatest failure was being unable to give her daughter the life she deserved. Brielle taught them both that neither belief was true. People are not defined by the moments when life breaks them. They are defined by what they choose to do with the pieces. If this story touched your heart, leave a meaningful comment telling us what you believe the greatest lesson was. that healing begins when we feel safe, that forgiveness can free us from the past, or that sometimes the person we think we are saving is actually the one saving us. And if this story reminded you that kindness can change a life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Because sometimes a child's first word is more than a word. Sometimes it is a door. And sometimes, when that door opens, two wounded hearts finally discover that they were never meant to walk through life alone.